Welcome to the All Outdoors Photography Podcast with your hosts Henry Doyle and Ryan Taylor, where we discuss all things related to outdoor and nature photography. In today's episode, we invite our original host Rylan Meadows back on the show to talk more about his foray into non-nature outdoor photography, such as portraiture and more. I hope you enjoy the show.
All right. So welcome back to episode 16 of the All Outdoors Photography Podcast. We've got a pretty cool episode for you guys today.
Something a little special here. We actually invited our original host, Rylan Meadows, back on the show, and he's going to talk about some recent developments in his photography career, including some outdoor portraiture. So it should be a fun episode. And Rylan, we're just going to take it away. Tell us again, for anyone that doesn't know, just briefly tell us about your background in photography and who you are and, what do you do?
Well, I am Rylan with Rylan's Amazing Photography. I do pretty much any photography that's outdoors. So I guess that goes right along with this podcast. I do outdoor portraits, I do landscapes, and I do wildlife. And I love traveling, doing photography. I've been doing it for about 2 years. And yeah, that's about all.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Short and sweet. Yeah.
Yes.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then, I mean, it's pretty great. I know you did, because you and me met like with doing YouTube and stuff, and you post pretty much only nature on their nature videos of photography. But yeah, if for anyone that follows your Instagram or elsewhere on your socials, you've been really making a big shift, a pivot, and kind of like doing subject matter wise. You've been doing a lot of portraits and stuff, which is really cool, specifically outdoor ones, which is why we're glad to have you back on to talk about those. So tell us just like why are you interested so much in portraiture, and what made you want to pursue it?
Well, I mean, I've always had somewhat of an interest in going into the portrait aspect of like photography. But like it's never really just like, it wasn't like an overnight decision, and it wasn't like just I woke up one morning and I was like, hey, I'm gonna shift to portraiture. I mean, it just kind of happened. I had a client come to me, it's probably been about a year ago at this point, wanting me to do portraits. And I was like, never really did that. But I mean, if you really want me to do it, I'll do it. And so I tried that out. And granted, at this point, looking back at those photos, it's just kind of like, oh. But like, I've really got into portraiture more recently. I don't really know why. I always enjoyed wildlife photography, and I've always told myself that I feel like portraiture is like a lot more controlled version of wildlife photography, because you can actually like communicate with your subject and tell them what to do. So like, I don't know. I mean, I really genuinely enjoy doing portraiture.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, the advantage is it's not like it's a totally new field. I mean, you could still apply similar settings. Obviously,
Right.
you have to use different principles, but similar skills can be transferred.
I mean, where I've been doing, like wildlife and landscape for a long time, I obviously had a really good understanding of like the camera and lenses and like obviously your camera settings and stuff. So it's just like, kind of tuning those in to how you would need them for people rather than a landscape or an animal.
Sure.
Yeah.
And also the advantage is you don't have to buy any gear. I mean,
true.
Maybe a couple portrait lenses, but you still, got the camera body and stuff. So that's definitely an advantage.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like it's more of a mental shift, I would say. I mean, the gear thing is pretty important, but it's like you kind of just shifting your focus. No pun intended. You're like, okay, instead of photographing a bird or something, it's like it's a person, but it's kind of easier. It's more forgiving because you can talk to the subject and make them kind of pose and do whatever you want pretty much for the photograph.
Right. I mean, it's definitely a mental transition because, for example, I could be out like a morning before I have a portrait shoot. Like that afternoon, I could be shooting birds, and it's like, oh, you never know, it's gonna like jump off this tree and fly off. But with portraiture, well, not 100% of the time, but you don't necessarily have to worry about someone just running away.
Yes.
Now, granted, I've had some experiences, but
I mean, I'm sure little kids and stuff.
Yeah. That's always an adventure.
Yeah.
This would be fun. Maybe you should share some later on in the episode if you would like to.
And then, And then another cool thing I've seen with your portraiture is you're obviously an outdoors guy, and you're really integrating kind of the scene around the person into the portrait. And I really like that. Can you kind of explain your thoughts behind that?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the scenery is so important in a portrait, and I feel like a lot of people miss that. I feel like I really, when I take a portrait, I don't necessarily want it to tell a story. It's great if it does, don't get me wrong, but I do want it to, kind of evoke an emotion, like just like set something off in your head, like, oh wow, that's really pretty, and I want you to think about it. I don't want you to just look at it and say, oh, there's old Bertha, there she is standing in the field. I want you to put more thought into it than that. I want you to kind of say, oh, there's Bertha, and there's like a really pretty barn in the background. And look at that vibrant grass.
I hope you don't have any clients named Bertha.
You just drove away 90% of your traffic.
Yep, there goes all the Berthas in the world. But I mean, I really feel like implementing the outdoors into the photo with the people it's something I enjoy, and I am very fortunate the fact that I live on like a farm that I can implement that. I have a creek, I have woods, I have old barns. It all just works out really good. I'm personally not a fan really of like really close up shots of people where you can't see the background, and I'm not really a fan of like having someone stand in front of a backdrop. I don't know. I just feel like when you're out showing a scene, it evokes more emotion.
I mean, obviously there's a place for those backdrops, but I feel like that should be mostly just for like school portraits and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely. I feel like that's really the only. I don't want to say the only place. I don't want to limit it to that, but I feel like that's like more of like a business or school kind of.
Yeah.
Yeah, something where it's really like a portrait. I think what kind of you're aiming towards really is just like an environmental portrait, because you're showing, like you said, more detail in the landscape. You might, keep the aperture a little bit more narrow, just so that way it does include more focus in the background, let's say. But yeah, it's a really neat kind of aspect to portrait photography, I think, that a lot of people overlook, because most people just want like a classic head and shoulders, and you're doing something a little bit different. You're including a lot more detail and size to the entire frame, really. So it's pretty neat. Yeah, I like that you're thinking with using your you said farm, and that's basically like your studio, which is really, really neat. Would you ever like shoot in like an indoor studio? Is that something that ever interested you?
I mean, I'm not gonna sit here and say, oh nope, I'm never gonna do studio portraits, because there was a time where like I kind of stepped back and I was like, I'm not gonna do portraits. That doesn't interest me. But here we are having this talk about me doing portraits. So I'm not gonna say I wouldn't ever do indoor portraits, because I feel like Henry said a second ago, there's a time and a place for shots like that, but right now, where I'm currently at in my career, I don't see me doing indoor anytime soon. However, granted, in years future, if something happens that I do portraiture, and that's like my career, and like that's what I'm doing with my life, I definitely feel like I would make space for doing indoor portraiture, just because it's cold and you can't always be outside, and obviously if I'm doing it for a career, I need financial money.
Yes, definitely.
So
yeah.
And then like say you had a client come to you and ask for maybe a mix of studio and outdoor, would you send them to another photographer? Do you have like do you have like a
assistant
blank
backups?
wall or something, or?
nah, that's a really good question. I've never had that happen, but I'm not going to say it couldn't happen, because there are photographers in my area that offer that. They'll offer like, well, you can get an hour of outdoor, and then we can do like a 15-minute shoot indoor as well. I don't have a plan implemented for that. I'm just going to go ahead and flat out say it. If that happened, I don't know what I would do, because I don't have like a backdrop. I mean, granted, I have white walls and I could do a lot of work in Photoshop and make it work. But is that going to be worth spending an hour in Photoshop for, I don't know, let's say $185 senior portrait package? I mean, or family package for that matter. I mean, it's something that I'm not going to rule out and say, no, I'm just going to send them to a different photographer. But I feel like I would work with the client somehow.
And it's definitely good right now. There's probably a lot of photographers in your town. There are in every town nowadays.
Yeah.
So it's probably good you're kind of carving out a niche
And plus, a
in
lot
that
of
kind of portrait space. Yep.
yeah, a lot of, especially with the pandemic now, a lot of indoor studios are closing because they just simply can't get enough money because they can't really bring in, clients and all that stuff. And doing them outdoors is actually something I feel like people are much more going to be suited to. So it kind of works in your
Yeah,
favor, I'd say.
with COVID-19, doing it outdoors is actually a lot safer because there was a time where the governor in Kentucky pretty much forced. I'm not going to say forced because that's not like, legally allowed. We're not going to get into that. But businesses were not allowed to be like open and functioning as normal, obviously. And like a lot of indoor portrait studios were actually closed down. There's a really big portrait studio called Portrait Innovations. That's probably about 45 minutes from where I live, and they were shut down,
Yeah, I
which
think they
meant
do
no
my
indoor
school pictures
portraits.
actually, which is cool.
That's neat.
Yeah.
Like I mean, there was a lot of people not being able to do indoor portraits, but I didn't get shut down, and I was still able to, operate as my business will say typically did because I was outdoors and you could socially distance, and you're not necessarily worrying about being up and close in each other's faces.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
definitely.
yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, really like that.
Man, I feel so bad for those full time, any kind of photographers really during the pandemic. It must have been crushing.
Yeah, definitely. I think a lot of photographers definitely took a big hit,
Mhm.
especially wedding photographers,
Yes,
because
yes,
COVID was really like in the heat in wedding season. So I'm sure that was bad for a lot of people.
for
Hmm.
sure.
And actually, I got to ask now, since you brought up weddings, would you ever do a wedding?
Oh, um,
Outdoor wedding?
probably. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm gonna say probably so. There's a really unique place, probably about 30 minutes from where I live. It's called the Barn at the Gorge. Really pretty, and it's all outside, and it's like this old barn, and they have a reception area inside. Anyways, that's a little off topic. I have been asked to do weddings before. I think I've been like asked to do. I want to say three. There was one that I had a conflict in schedule. There was another one that it was just like, oh, because it was like this really like kind of, it was a weird theme. It was like a Halloween theme, and it was just like,
What?
well, okay. But I also had a conflict in schedule as well. So it was like I didn't have to be like, oh, I don't want to do it. So I was like, oh well, I have a schedule conflict, sorry. So that worked out in my favor. And then there was another one that I was offered to do, and then I sent my pricing and they never got back with me. So I guess it was too much. But to be fair, my pricing for weddings is like really good, and that's mainly because I'm like just starting off and I've never did a wedding. It's obviously gonna rise in the future, but like they weren't gonna find no one cheaper than what I was priced. I assure you of that. So they must not know how to photographer.
How much, if you don't mind me asking?
Um, 1 second, let me pull it up. I have like a little folder on my phone where I put all of my portrait pricing, so
That's cool.
when anyone ever asks, I can just pull it right on up. Let's see here. Okay, so wedding photography. I'm not going to go through all the details, but I have 3 packages. The first package is 500, the second package is 700, and the third package is 900.
Yeah, that's a great deal for a wedding.
So
That's
it's
really,
like if
yeah.
you're not going to take that for wedding photography. Okay. Good luck.
That's probably
Probably
the
are,
cheapest
yeah.
part of the whole entire wedding too, is like the photographer,
Yeah.
because everything else is just insanely expensive too.
I mean, I've heard nowadays some wedding photographers, like the cheaper ones, are like $5,000. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah.
In my area, I think it starts around like 2,000, and that's like starting prices.
Ugh.
So like starting at 500 is really good. Now, granted, eventually mine's probably going to rise quite a bit, but I want to at least get like 1 or 2 weddings under my belt before I would go and raise the price, just so I have that to add to my portfolio.
If I ever get married, I guess I'm just gonna photograph my own wedding.
Selfie mode.
That's the way to do it.
I'll just hire one of you guys. How about that?
Yeah.
Sounds great. Good plan.
Yeah, there you go. Right on. Yeah, I've never done. I mean, my portraiture experience is very, very small. Like a couple years ago, I did some senior portraits for like I got $100 check in return, but they're like looking back on them. I don't even have like the raw files or images, but I just remember them being terrible. It's like really sunny light midday, and just harsh highlights. The real like deep shadows on people's faces too. It's just like terrible. So, but yeah, it's something you just got to learn and do with experience. I think.
Definitely. All right. So, another question here is my favorite thing, gear. So, um, if people haven't listened to you before, can you kind of go over your camera and maybe your main portrait lens that you use?
Yeah, so my primary camera is a Nikon D500. And typically my primary portrait lens, for the most part, has been a 24-70 Nikkor f2.8. I use a variety of lenses. I recently added the 70-200 to my collection, which has been really handy for portraiture. Actually, I've used it on a couple of sessions that I've had here recently. Not gonna get really technical or anything, but when you're using a longer lens like that, it obviously compresses the background of the photo better. So like if you're in the woods or if you're in an open field, that really, as far as bokeh and compression goes, that goes really well together with the 70-200. There was a family I did recently where that did a really good job compressing like the fall colored trees behind them. Like it wasn't necessarily popping out, and you wouldn't have got anywhere near the colors that you did with my 24-70 that I did with my 70-200. Thanks to that compression. As far as gear goes, I also have a Nikon D3500, which is just a little starting up camera, and that's like my backup camera.
Cool.
It's neat.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 7200 for portraits is amazing.
It's a beast. I love it.
I mean, I recently sold mine. I had the F4, and even that was good. I had F4. Good.
Yeah, definitely.
I like that. Do you have like a preference in terms of like focal length? Do you prefer wider, or do you like to crop in a little bit more and compress everything?
It really depends on the scene. You all have seen my work. If I'm doing like something that's like, I don't know, if I'm doing something, yeah, if I'm doing something, if there's like a really, if there's like a really interesting scene beside me, like if I'm having a subject setting by a waterfall, we'll say, definitely gonna go for the more wide angled shot, where I'm getting as much of the scene along with the subject in the picture. But if I'm doing something like I want trees in the background, I'm probably going to go to my 70-200 because that's really going to compress that scene and make it look like it's right behind them. When in reality, it's like 100 or 200 yards away, but you wouldn't know that because of the compression of the lens. I probably like the tighter end better, not necessarily the tighter end shot, but like the longer focal length. Mm-hmm. Around 160, I find is really good for portraits.
Awesome.
That's weird. That's interesting. I guess because I'm kind of a newbie at maybe a portraiture at least right now, but like, is that kind of like awkward to be that distance away, even with like the pandemic and stuff going on? Like,
right?
How's that work? How does that work exactly? I guess
it is kind of uncomfortable because, like, obviously, if I didn't know anything about photography and someone was standing like that far away from me, it's gonna be kind of awkward because they're like, "What are they doing?" Because I mean, if you were taking a photo of someone on an iPhone from that far away, which is what people in today's society are traditionally think of a phone taking a photo, you would look like you were forever away. So like, it's kind of like before I start backing up, it's like I almost have to do like a brief explanation, or I know they're gonna like think I'm crazy. It's so like I'm usually like, so this lens, I like zoom in really far away, and I'm like, and it makes the background look like it's closer to you, and it's really blurred out. And trust me, it looks good. And they're like, okay, because I mean, granted, if I didn't know what I was doing, I would think I was a crazy man getting that far away. I mean, even with COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but like personally, what I use is kind of an 85 millimeter. I got a little prime lens for portraits, and that's kind of in between. But I see what you mean. There's definitely the very strange looks sometimes.
Yeah, especially when you're like around 200 and 160. Like
Yeah.
if it's a family of 5, that's a pretty good distance away.
You should bring out that 200, 500. See what
Oh gosh, I'll freak out.
Try 600. They'll think you're like sniping them from far away. I promise it'll look good.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. Get a teleconverter on there.
Oh man. There's no background. It's just like clean little blur or something. Bokeh.
Yep.
Just some red and yellow behind them.
It's gonna look good, trust me.
Yeah. Do people
Oh,
like? I mean, obviously you get a lot of clients, and your work's great and everything. But like, is there like a preference really? Do like people like to have include the background a lot, or does they just like a nice solid portrait of just them?
Well, I try to give a variety because I've never really had like anyone flat out be like, I want I want just more of me than less of the scene, or I want more of the
Mm.
scene along with me. Granted, if someone did that, obviously I'm going to make that happen, but I do a wide variety just because I don't want, I want them to be pleased, and that's the goal at the end of the day is to please the client. So
Mm.
I just give them a variety. I've never really found that anyone has a certain preference, at least yet.
Yeah, I feel like they like a little bit of a surprise too, honestly. So it's like they'll see a shot and be like, "Wow, I never even
Right.
thought of that sort of thing." Because yeah, up
Uh,
in probably about a week and a half from now, I have my first engagement shoot just for some coworkers,
Oh,
and
that's
so
exciting.
it's a nice entryway because they kind of like I had a phone call with them and I was talking about it a little bit, and I was and they have ideas of like shots they want, like, oh, we want one of the ring. I'm like, okay, cool, a detail shot, of the hand and all that stuff wearing it, of course. But like,
Right.
yeah, this it's like kind of just whatever I want in a way, and I'm going to do like a variety of angles, like you're saying, and different stuff. And I wouldn't be surprised if they, they'll like them. I think so. Just kind of
Yeah, I'm
experiment
sure you'll
with
do
it.
great. You sound like you're prepared. Like you've already did a phone call with them and everything. That's more than what I do. Like I'm not gonna
It's
lie,
be
I've never
professional.
had a phone call. You're doing it. That's really good. Now, granted, if it was a wedding, it'd be a different story, and I'd be stressed out, and I'd be making sure I was a lot more
Yeah.
prepared. But
It'd be
I'm sure
several
you'll do
phone
great.
calls.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just helps. I like
So
to know ahead of time. So
yeah. So you seem to take a wide variety of portraits. Are you you have a certain favorite? Like, do you prefer groups, individuals?
Um, I definitely have a preference. Now, I love all of the work. As far as like, I love groups. I love couples. There, I mean, I definitely have a preference. Yeah, I like doing individuals better than like groups because there's not necessarily as much that I have to worry about. Now, obviously, each one of them has their own challenges, and each one of them has like a fun, a more fun side to it than the other. But with individuals, I feel like I can be more creative as like a photographer and artist, we'll say, um, than I can be with a group. With a group, I feel like it's a lot more stressful because you're having to make sure everyone's looking at the camera and you're making sure that
mm,
everyone's not like someone's hand is cropped out. And you're having to make sure that for when you do prints that you're not gonna like that you're still gonna be able to do a 8x10 crop on it if necessary. Whereas an individual, you're not necessarily have to worry about all those things as much. So I'm gonna say that I probably enjoy individuals more than anything else. Couples
yeah,
are good too. Their couples aren't necessarily as stressful.
Hmm. Yeah,
because
I feel
like
like with group shots, you have to deal with like family squabbles, like clashing personalities and
Oh
stuff.
my gosh,
there's a lot more
that has
variables
happened
too.
to me
Yeah.
before. I can't even lie about it. That's happened to me before. I had a family of I want to say about 15 or so, and
Wow.
that was a really stressful time in my career.
Tested
Hope you
your
got
limits.
paid well for that one.
Yeah. That's great. No, I mean, I can understand what you're saying. Like, I feel like couples, they at least kind of focus on each other more so. I feel like if you want like a candid pose kind of shot, but yeah, individuals, it's kind of the same
Right.
thing because it's just a one-on-one kind of session. But yeah, families is just like, there's so many variables. And I just can't imagine if like you, a few rowdy kids in there and it's just in the whole bunch, everything could
And I
just
mean,
kind of go wrong.
So you said you have your different packages. Will you ever do any exceptions? Like, have you ever gotten any like crazy requests or anything? Kind of. any weird backgrounds or something? I don't know.
What's your most interesting clients?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, I mentioned where I was contacted about like that Halloween wedding, which was, interesting to say the least. And I'm not bashing them by any means. I mean, whatever makes that couple happy, you go for it. but I I'm thinking I haven't had like any strange request. I've had like this person that came to me one time that was like claiming to be a really distant family member, and
Oh.
they contacted me and they were like, "So we need a maternity photo shoot," which is something that I'd never thought about, and I was thinking, "Oh gosh." So I designed like a package. Now, granted, some of my packaging I like advertise, like the family portraits and the mini sessions and the senior portraits, but I don't ever like really put any pressure on things like a maternity shoot or like weddings, not the more uncomfortable, like stressful sides. Um, so it was like I fixed up the pricing and I sent it to this person, and they were like, "Okay, thank you." And then they were like, "Oh, by the way, I'm so and so's stepdaughter." And I was like, and the deal was, it was like once she said that, oh well, once they said that, excuse me, once they said that, it was like I knew who they were, and it was like I was like, okay, that's cool, but like knowing who they were, it was like they definitely were like trying to get me to give them a discount, which makes it uncomfortable. Like when you're hiring someone to do something, it makes it uncomfortable if you're like, oh well, you should like, do you know who I am?
You should give me a discount because I'm related.
Yeah, it's like when someone says that, that's totally what they're wanting. But like, I was just like, oh, that's cool, because I really didn't want to do a maternity photo shoot anyway, so I definitely wasn't gonna like offer a discount for it.
That's just weird. I don't know. I don't get that.
That's probably the weirdest thing that's ever happened. I mean, as far as portraiture goes, I've not really had any really strange requests, but I'm sure it's bound to happen eventually.
Yeah.
My pet
Have you ever
tiger.
done any?
Can you
Yeah.
photograph him? Sorry.
That's what I was about to mention. Have you ever done any non-human
Yeah.
like pet photography, anything like that?
I did pet photography for my pets. I never did anyone else's though.
That's a strange.
But I truly feel like that's like somewhat of an interest at this point, because I mean you hear of people making a living off of pet photography. Granted, that's more of like in a big city, but I mean I feel like it's possible. But I've never had that request.
I feel like it's like it could bridge the gap in between doing like wildlife and people, because it's like an animal. It's kind of more forgiving.
Yeah.
You can kind of
Like,
not, I don't know, boss it around. I
it's
guess
tame.
move around.
Right.
From hawks to chihuahuas, Rylan shoots it all.
Your New
From
Times
hawks to
article.
chihuahuas to the crazy grandma in the back. Oh god.
Hawks, Bertha, and the chihuahua.
Oh gosh.
From hawks to chihuahuas to grandma.
He does it all.
Oh my- wow, man, that is funny. I'm gonna on that note, I'm gonna take it back around a little bit to the gear thing. Because I'm just interested. Do you ever like use flash, or do you use like natural light, or
Oh,
what's
that's a
your
really
lighting
good question.
situation like?
I've used a flash. I own a flash. Very rarely do I use it. Now, in the beginning, I thought no matter the time of day, no matter the portrait I was taking, I gotta have that flash on there, and I gotta use that flash. But as I've gotten more into portraiture, I have more of an understanding, and I really like having that natural environment. We discussed earlier about the locations and the scenery and stuff. I feel like a flash can honestly take away from that at times. So I tend to use more natural light at this point. I haven't used a flash for quite some time, but I always do have it in my camera bag in case a scenario arises where I need it. Also, as far as like external lights, I have external lights. I've never used them because typically we're going from location to location. So for one, I don't take the time to set it up. But for two, when you've got like a lit up subject and the background isn't matching that same exposure, not only does that have like its challenges as far as technical wise goes, but I think that takes away from the realistic look of the photo and it almost makes it look more as if it's in a studio rather than natural environment.
Yeah. I could only imagine using a flash, especially outdoors with Portraiture, if it's like an extremely dark area, like, I don't know, you're in a
Right.
cave or something, something strange, or maybe if the woods are just very, very dark that day from a cloudy day. But I
Yeah.
find personally, if when I'm viewing Portraiture, then again, I'm just viewing it as like an outsider, just not taking it. But I'm just like, I find the way Flash makes, it fills in the shadow details and stuff like that. I find it kind of unflattering. And kind of like what you said, it kind of feels like a studio shot outdoors, which I just don't like. I don't know. It's not my style.
Yeah, I mean, there's a time and a place for Flash, but I agree with you 100% on that. It can make it feel unnatural when it should be feeling natural.
You got to find the right angle to bounce it to, like for each scenario. Like
Definitely.
sometimes you got to just rotate it up a little bit. Like sometimes straight on isn't always the best.
Right.
Usually never
Or
is.
bounce
Yeah,
it up.
usually want to bounce it to some angle or reflect it. Use a reflector even, but it's just so obvious
Which
seeing a shot of like a family or a couple or something and being like, well, I can tell they use a flash. At least for us, it might be easy to notice. But
yeah.
yeah, I would prefer like a
And
nice golden hour light or a sunburst, or even if I've seen a lot of
same
times
here.
they'll overexpose the sky in the background purposely, and that even looks good with the portrait because you're not really focused on that aspect in particular.
Especially when
Yeah,
that's
I
a
agree.
nice blurry background too. That looks
Yeah,
really good.
definitely. Yeah, it's all about kind of just making this. It's different from what we do as like landscapes and stuff. I think because we blown out sky background is like really unattractive and noticeable, but with
Right.
like a portrait, something about that it's a whole different dynamic. But yeah, it actually just works out.
It really is, and that's something that we talked on earlier. Like you've really kind of got to get in the mindset of portraiture, rather than thinking about landscapes or something, because that can totally mess up the entire shoot if your head isn't in the right place.
Yeah.
Get your head in the game. Yeah. Yeah. So what kind of like camera exposure settings do you use for like the portraits? What's some like ideal ones that you could like
Uh,
just name, I guess? I mean, I guess your aperture would usually be kind of wide. Maybe not for the longer telephoto stuff, but
yeah. Generally, I like to keep a really low f-stop. For individual people, when I'm doing like individuals or couples, I'm typically at usually as low as like my primary lens goes, which is f2.8, because obviously that's giving you a really nice blurry background and a great bokeh. But when I'm doing groups, that obviously changes. I'm usually around f8 when I'm doing a group because you want to make sure that everyone's in focus. And the background's not going to be as blurred out, but that's just a sacrifice that you're going to make sure that everyone's sharp and in focus. I do everything else manually, which can be looked down upon. But when I'm shooting with a crop sensor camera, I don't generally like using auto ISO because that can screw things up for me later.
For sure.
yeah,
Do
definitely.
you use autofocus or manual focus or?
Yeah, I autofocus.
Mhm.
Typically single point. Every now and then I'll do group, but
Awesome.
Makes sense. Yeah, focus basically in between the eyes, pretty much on the
yeah.
face. Yeah.
And with a mirrorless camera, that would be a lot easier for me to do. I do currently shoot DSLR, but a lot of the mirrorless cameras have like facial detection.
Yeah, it's
And granted,
sorry.
my camera has facial detection, but I can't use it through the viewfinder because
Ew.
it's not a mirrorless camera.
Yeah.
Yeah, so on mine, it has IAF, which is pretty cool when I'm shooting at 1.8 on my 85.
yeah.
It's really nice. Although it's not, I do have the EOS RP, so it's not, it misses half the time, but it is nice when it hits.
Nice feature if
Yeah,
it worked.
Yes.
in the future for portraiture, a mirrorless camera is definitely something that I should probably look into for head and eye AF. I feel like that would be really handy for me.
That Z6 too looks pretty cool.
Yeah, it does. I was looking at some of the Z6 II and the Z7 II specs the other day, and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. And you
And then
can
I
use
looked at
those
the
same
price.
lenses
I
for
was like,
photo.
oh, okay.
So do you ever use like a tripod? I mean, I guess you're a little more on the move, I guess, outdoors, but do you use a tripod at all?
um, I have, and typically that's only for self portraits, and if I'm taking like a portrait with me and my family in it, because typically I'm moving around and changing the angle. So like when I'm actually working with a client, I'm usually all handheld.
Yeah, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I was always taught
Especially,
if you want to be professional, you always like you don't look at the viewfinder. I mean, excuse me, you don't look at the LCD screen on the back, and they're like just look through the exposure meter in the viewfinder, and don't every time you take a shot, review it on the back. They're like make yourself look professional.
Right, but I mean that can be challenging at times. You always want to make yourself look professional. So what I do is I'll typically take 2 or 3 shots, and I'll be like, "Oh wow, those look really great," and then I might look on my LCD screen and it's extremely underexposed. Never let the client know that anything went wrong. Always like keep your game face on. I guess your poker face. Like be like, "Oh my gosh, these look so good," and then just like adjust your exposure and then take another shot and properly expose it.
yeah.
Because that happens to me sometimes. Sometimes I'll like really overexpose a shot or really underexpose the shot because of the last location, and I forgot to change my exposure settings, like my shutter speed and such. And then I look and it's like, oh, but I never let the client see me go, oh, I'm always like, oh my gosh, these look so good. Let's take a couple more. And
I
then
just
we
think
take
it'd
a
be
couple
funny, like
more.
these are the best shots of the day. Let me take like 20 more. Don't ask. I'm lying. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, that makes total sense. I definitely agree with you there. Yeah. It's all about kind of just
And
keeping a cool, calm demeanor, and it'll make the clients feel at ease as well.
Yeah, definitely. Which then again, that would be a plus for a mirrorless camera because you're seeing like how exposed you're. I believe if I'm correct when you're looking at the EVF. Henry, you
Yeah,
have a mirrorless. Ryan, you might. I'm not.
I
Ryan, do
do
you shoot
not.
mirrorless?
No,
It,
yeah,
nope. I'm
so like,
DSLR.
so basically, what you'll see in live view on your guys' DSLRs is what I see through the viewfinder as well. So I can know exactly what my exposure is going to look like. It's
oh,
So
I
basically, it
love
has
it.
in-camera exposure simulation through the viewfinder.
Yes, and it's
Is that
pretty
correct?
much once you
Wow.
get once you get your brightness settings figured out. For me, at least, it's pretty much 100% accurate. Like what I see is what I get. So it's awesome.
so it's pretty much
This,
like live view, except you're looking through a viewfinder,
Yes.
right?
Uh huh.
Okay. Well, that's pretty handy.
Yeah.
Like,
The one
I,
there is a lot of
I'm,
lag that's been
what?
annoying me with wildlife recently,
yeah,
like the birds jumping around the screen. But
right.
besides that, I don't have any complaints. Yeah.
But that's
I
so
feel like
nice
for
because it's like
portraits,
what you see is
though,
what you get. You know.
Yep.
I feel like
Mirrorless
for
is the
portraits
future.
that would be handy.
Yeah.
I would
It's
definitely
great.
be handy with
And
portraits.
another thing, I had a portrait shoot a couple weeks ago. I don't do it as much as you do, but I was shooting the people with my camera, not with a gun. And then
It's hunting season.
Oh, I'm
oh my
choking on
god!
God.
A cool thing about mirrorless cameras, you can review your images in the viewfinder. So what I'll do is I'll shoot a couple pictures of people, check in the viewfinder, so they think I'm still shooting pictures. So I can just check in there real quick and go right
Oh,
back and continue shooting. So that's awesome
wow.
about that. Uh-huh.
That's cool. Yeah, as long
Well,
as the lag isn't too, excusable. I mean, if it's not too bad that
Oh, the, the
slows you
the
down.
lag's not horrible. Just compared to DSLR, DSLR is
Mm.
obviously real time. This is
I
like just like you're looking through a live view screen. So
It's
right.
noticeable
That's
enough, but it's not enough to like
uh,
hinder you down. You know,
I only notice it on like the fastest moving birds when they're in flight. So for people, you're not going to notice that unless they're the fastest man on earth or something.
you're not a thousandth of a second shutter speed. Yeah, typically
Yeah.
for people just standing there.
Although
Yeah.
if you're in bright sunlight, I mean, I'm sure sometimes you'll have to be. They're standing still, obviously.
right.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, so Rylan, tell us maybe if you can. I mean, it seems like you have a lot of experience by now. Is there any kind of like advice or tips you could maybe give to like a beginning portrait photographer? Anything of any sorts that we may have not discussed yet?
Yeah, sure. I mean, we discussed this briefly earlier, but if anything is ever going wrong, don't let them know. Like, if it's something that you can fix and something that you can control, like whether that be in post-processing or in your camera right then, just don't worry about it. Just keep your game face on, keep it steady. Something that's also very important, non-photography aspect, is scheduling. Try to be as accommodating as possible and always verify a date. Don't be like, oh, so the last Saturday in the month, because someone could get that mixed up with the Saturday before. Or, always specifying a date and specifying a time is really important. Don't say next Tuesday. They might think you mean this Tuesday. So it's a date is always very important.
Have you ever mixed up a date before?
Yeah.
Oh my! That was easy. He was so honest.
But luckily it was in my favor over the clients, because it was like,
oh, good. That's
I
good.
thought they were supposed to show up, but it wasn't them that was supposed to show up. So I showed up and they didn't, which obviously was awkward.
It's a lot better. Yeah.
And they were like, "Are we still on for the shoot?" And they're like, "Oh, nope, wrong date. Sorry, it'll be next week." And I was like, "Oh, okay, that's fine." Which luckily I do everything like right outside of my house, so it wasn't like I'd driven a long way or anything. So always verify a date. Can't stress that enough.
I feel like to add on to that, yeah, it's like it's important to have everything in writing, like make a contract or just have like some kind of agreement laid out and be like, hey, we're gonna meet up at this date at this place this time. Just have everything laid out, make sure they understand, that this is a shoot and like you're setting aside this time to photograph them instead of just shooting on speculation, like you're saying, next Tuesday, and then they go, I forgot, I slept in,
Which that's something that I was about to touch on too. Like, it's especially more of when you're doing like a wedding or an engagement session. It's important to have a contract and lay out your expectations and their expectations, and then you both sign. Now, granted, I am not 18, which means I could come up with a contract, but if I do and we both sign, that's basically just a piece of paper and an agreement, and it wasn't like hold up if I got sued or anything. So that's not anything that I can get into legally yet. But if I shoot a wedding, I'm definitely going to outline all the expectations and have that in writing, even if it's not going to like hold up. Just so someone can't come at me and say, well, you said we were going to do this. I'm going to say, well, right here it says that we were going to do this and this. And when you're doing like family portraits or senior portraits, that's not necessarily as important. I've never found it necessary to have a contract for that. I mean, it's really important to discuss your expectations with each other. But where it's just like I don't want to say an unimportant session, but it's not like, if you don't have those photos, you're going to be heartbroken kind of session.
The stakes are lower.
Right. Yeah. It's like, it's not the end of the world if something goes wrong or if they accuse you of not doing something that you weren't supposed to do. Which, I mean, granted, it's always bad if a client's not pleased, which thankfully I've never had happen. But I mean, if it does, I would much rather it be something like a senior portrait or a family portrait than a wedding or an engagement session,
something you could do over again to some extent. Right. But a wedding, it's like, try getting everyone to rearrange themselves again.
Yeah, I mean, if a photographer did something wrong at a wedding or something, I mean, that would be, I don't know, but that would be crazy, like either party does something wrong at the wedding. Yeah. And I know sometimes at weddings, the bride or the groom or whatever, they hate your photos and then they won't pay you. And, you've just done a 10-hour wedding shoot and they won't do anything. It's horrible sometimes.
Which, I mean, that's also a really good reason to have like a contract and then like a down payment. That's not what it is, but it's like a deposit. You pay me this much. Yes, that I cannot think of that word for the life of me. It's always good to have a deposit, and then obviously a contract in writing. So like they can't like come at you. Like you could take them to court and say they said they were going to pay me this much. Because I mean, some people that's like their life, and I mean, like if you're supposed to be getting paid $5,000 and that's what you're doing for a living, and they're refusing to pay you. I mean, that's probably something that you're going to take to court to get your money.
Especially when especially like the big name professional wedding photographers or whatnot, they only do a couple weddings a year because it just pays that much. So yeah,
Yeah.
Right.
if you don't,
Exactly.
especially in season, and like if you don't do one, something just goes wrong, and they don't pay you. It's like that's pretty detrimental to their business.
Yes. And
Definitely.
what I like about your portrait work, I've seen this on your Instagram stories quite a bit. You seem to have set plan prices so people can't try to, like, say you show up to a shoot, people can't just say, "Oh, can I pay you $10 less or something?" You seem to have good,
Exactly.
like, criteria, I guess.
Yeah.
And I always make sure to specify the price because, for example, the family portraits or the mini sessions, if you want to add people on, that is additional cost. Because, like, for family portraits, I do up to 6, I think is what my packaging is, which means if it's 7 or more people, you're going to have more charges. And granted, I just do like a $15 charge per additional person that you're going to add. But I always make sure to verify that and make sure that's okay with the client before I have them show up and be like, well, the portrait package says that it's just this much. You didn't say that it was supposed to be that much. And I mean, I'll work with you too. Like if you don't necessarily have the funding or like the money to pay me right then, I will take like a deposit and then you can pay me the rest of the money next week or in a couple of days. I mean, I'm workable.
Yeah, it's good to be flexible because it's such a. I mean, we're artists with the camera, and it's like there's a lot of business involved in paperwork, but it's at the end of the day, it's like we need to be flexible and accommodate the clients first and foremost, make them happy.
Because a lot of people are always. I feel like there's kind of an impression on society that's like all they do is go out there and point a camera and snap. When in reality, there's so much more to it. I mean, as far as dialing in your settings and editing your photos and coming up with contracts, copyright release forms, getting your prints. I mean, it's a lot of work, and I feel like some people just like don't have that understanding.
Oh, for sure. And do you kind of charge extra for editing time, like, or do you just kind of charge the same for every session, no matter how long the editing takes?
Um, Currently, I'm just doing like a set fee. I'll say like this much for a family portrait package and all professionally edited images. And I'll go through and typically I'll spend about 2 or 3 hours tops editing the photos, which isn't bad. I usually try to have all of the photos edited within at least a day. And typically I get my editing done pretty fast. So I've not ever had like a problem with that. I know some photographers, they'll say you just get 10 photos, which is like, there's nothing wrong with doing that because obviously you're going to be taking your time a lot more on the photos and editing them a lot longer. But I'm not going to say I prefer quality over quantity, but I prefer to have good quality and a big quantity of it as well. Like if you get a family portrait session that's an hour, you're probably going to get at least like 80 photos from me, which is really good. A lot of photographers aren't going to do that.
That's a lot.
And you're getting like different settings as well. So
Do you kind
I
of
like to have a variety.
export all the ones you get, or do you comb through them, or?
Batch process.
As far as the 80 photos, I could have taken probably about 400 photos and then have 80 keepers.
Okay.
It's not like every single photo I'm exporting or anything. I definitely go through and make sure that I'm picking out the best pose. And on the really good ones, I'll do like multiple edits. I'll do like one realistic edit and then I'll do like one creative edit.
That's cool.
I think you kind of know what I mean.
Yeah, like a more kind of Instagram-y kind of.
Or black and white
like
or selective color, stuff
Yeah,
like that.
like
Selective
kind of a
focus.
different tone color edit, and then I'll do like just a regular, like the way it actually looked.
Oh, I never actually thought about that because I assume most clients or whatnot would like to have just a solid photo of them. But yeah, that's really neat how you kind of think outside the box and you give them options to like look over. That's really neat.
Yeah,
Right,
I mean, instead of them putting some dumb weird filter on it, why not have a professional photographer make it a little bit creative?
Filter.
Yeah.
like I would cringe so hard if I ever like seen someone posting one of my photos with like an Instagram filter. I'll just be like, oh my god,
Crank up
So,
the
like,
saturation.
For the really good one, yeah. For the really good one, I try to like do like a creative edit of my own. So if that's like something that they would want to post on Instagram or something, it's like there you go. Go ahead and post it.
So you mentioned prints. So I'm curious. Like, what's the finished product for you? Do you give out downloads, like download links to them, or do you do prints? Do you print them yourself? If so, like, tell us a little more about
Um,
that. The end result.
so as far as prints go, once we've worked together and once I've edited all of the photos and have them done, um, I have a website, and I use Squarespace to host that. Not sponsored, although one day that would be great. Squarespace, call me. Um,
This podcast is sponsored by Wix.com, the competitor to Squarespace.
oh gosh. Um, I mean, and I'll upload all of the photos onto like a private link. And then I'll like message or text or email whatever that link to the client. And what I'll do is, when you look at my portrait packages, most of them come with prints. And so, like, I'll do the family portrait package, for example. Package 1 comes with 2 8x10s, 4 5x7s, and like 8 wallet prints, I think. That's not a definite. I'm not looking at that, so don't quote me on that, but it's something like that. So that would mean you get 2 poses. Like, does that make sense? So you're gonna get 1 8x10 of one pose, 1 8x10 of another pose, and you're gonna get 2 5x7s of one pose, 2 5x7s of the other
Like,
pose.
are you talking
And then,
like the same scene with a different look, or just?
no,
Okay.
it's like the exact same photo. Like you know how they do a school
Oh
portrait
yeah.
packaging?
Uh-huh.
Like you'll
Okay.
get the same photo as an 8x10 and then a 5x7 and then like a wallet print.
Oh, okay.
So
Okay.
so that's what I'm doing here, except there's like 2 options. Like you can pick. So I mean, do you all understand what I'm saying? Like it's
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
like I think I explained that good
So,
enough.
so,
So
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to ask. So does the clients choose the photos, like in that instance, or do you? Is all the creative control at least with you in that?
Yeah, so what I'm doing now, this probably isn't the most professional way to do it, but I'll send them the website link, where they can look through all of their photos. And let's say, like I said, they get 2 poses. So they're gonna get the 1 8x10 of one photo and 1 8x10 of the other photo, and then the 2 5x7s and the 4 wallet prints. Anyways, I let them pick the photos, like the 2 photos, the best ones, or not necessarily the best ones, but the ones that they want. And then I'll just tell them to send me a screenshot of that photo or take a picture of it with their phone and send it to me, and then I order the prints of it. Now, granted, in some of my senior portrait packages, I'll have like 50 4x6s and 25 4x6s. When it comes to like printing out a bunch of different photos for the 4x6s, I go through and pick all of those out, because it would be really time consuming and just kind of pointless. Well, not necessarily pointless, but I guess more of time consuming to have a client go through and pick 50 different photos that they want printed for their 4x6. So
Yeah.
I do all that and I pick like a variety and the best quality photos for that. But when
Yeah.
it's like the 8x10s and the 5x7s and the wallet prints, since it's just like one pose for all of those anyways, I'll let them go ahead and pick it. And I mean, I think you all understand what I mean. It's just I'm trying to
Yeah.
explain like the print packages that
And then, do you do in-house printing or?
no, I actually my printer I use Miller's Photo Lab. They are so good too. I mean, if I was to order them at like 10 o'clock in the morning one day, they will be at my doorstep the next day.
Wow.
They do FedEx overnight shipping without any additional charging, and the
Hmm.
prints are so good and crisp and clear. I mean, I am very impressed. They package them so well and neat. I love
Cool.
Miller's. They're really good.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Is that based in your area or?
Um, I'm honestly not sure where it's based. I want to say maybe somewhere in Georgia
Oh
or
wow, that's
Ohio,
really
maybe.
fast.
Miller's
That's
might be
not a 100.
Ohio.
Actually,
It sounds familiar. It might be
I
Ohio,
can. I
but
might.
maybe like the
Let me look.
Cincinnati area, because that'll be right next to in between both of us,
Possibly.
or around there.
Um. Oh wow. Okay. So I was wrong. They are located in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and Columbia, Missouri.
Jeez, well, that's
And I mean,
really
it's
fast
here
shipping.
the next day.
That's
So
fast.
I'm very impressed.
I mean, that's faster than my photo lab that's right down the street that I use sometimes.
Yeah, they are very good. If you all ever order prints, whether it be portraits or whatnot, I totally recommend Miller's. They're really good.
Awesome.
That's awesome. So yeah, that pretty much wraps it up, I think. But I have one more question for you. So has expanding your portfolio to include people improved you overall as a photographer?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Um, I feel like it has because I'm really putting my creativeness more out there, and I'm not necessarily focusing on a niche. I feel like in the industry, a lot of people are really like kind of bashing down on you got to pick a niche and you just got to stick with it, which is something I don't agree with. I'm not gonna sit here and say you shouldn't just have one niche, but I feel like you should explore more, and I feel like exploring more with that you're gonna learn more and you're gonna have more skill sets, and at the end of the day, it's gonna expand your portfolio and you're gonna get more use out of the photos that you take. Um, I mean, I think it's probably made me a better photographer overall because I think the more that you experiment and the more that you practice and the more trial and error with it, you're going to become a better photographer. And that just reflects because you're seeing that you can do multiple things and have really, really good or pretty good results out of all of it. I mean, I've did landscapes, I've did wildlife, and now I'm doing portraiture. And I've been decently successful at all of those things. So I feel like, yeah, at the end of the day, it's made me a better photographer.
Awesome.
Yeah, it keeps things fresh and helps you diversify. And you're not doing decently. You're doing very well, I think, overall. Like all
Yeah,
your
you're
photography.
doing great. Yeah, and
Thank you.
you know how to expand social media awareness or
Outreach.
popularity too. You're doing great on that.
Thank you very much.
Awesome.
So before we go here, do you have any ongoing projects or announcements that you want to mention to our audience?
Oh gosh, you've put me on the spot. I'm trying to think. I don't think so.
Okay.
Cool.
It is coming up on almost a year since I have finished writing my first book, Out of the Darkness. So I'm probably going to be mentioning that here soon. Not publishing it. I published it in March, but it was around this time last year that I was actually finishing up the writing.
Cool.
So that's really exciting to say that I've had a book out or finished writing a book for almost a year. I plan on. I don't know if I should say this or not, but I'm just gonna go ahead and say it. I plan on writing another book very soon.
You've heard it here.
It's a local. It's more of a local aspect, though. It's gonna be a book on the Red River Gorge only.
Ooh.
In the future, I definitely plan to do more writing on like overall nature photography, not portraiture. But yeah, that's about all I've got. I'll have a video coming out this Thursday. Not sure what that's going to be about yet, but it'll be there. Or no, this Friday. This Friday.
Yeah.
Friday.
So, Rylan, where's the main place you want people? Couple main places you want people going to check out your work.
The best place to see like a variety of my work is probably my Instagram page. At Rylan's Amazing Photography. And then if you're interested in seeing my best work, you can go to my website and look at my portfolio, which is rylansamazingphotography.com.
Awesome.
Cool. Awesome.
Well, thank you for coming on, Rylan. It's great having you again.
Well, thank you both so much for having me.
Oh, of course.
See you guys next week. Bye.
Thank you so much for watching the All Outdoors Photography Podcast. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and the video version on YouTube as well. You can subscribe down below, and we look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thank you.